Hello everybody, and welcome back to Olive Boy Pens. I'm here again to talk to you about some vintage and modern pens. And I'm really excited about this one because these are some pens that I have owned and had experience with, some of which, some of the pens in this series I come at with a fresh perspective and get kind of first impressions on both. But for both the vintage Pilot Elite and the Pilot E95S, I've owned them for a decent amount of time. So I can come at you with the perspective of a long-time user when comparing these two lovely long-short style vintage pens. The former being a lovely 1974 Pilot Elite and its matching pencil, though we're not going to review the pencil because I haven't broken into the pencil review sphere yet. Let me know if you want me to do that. I don't know if y'all are pencil people, but I am. And the modern remake, I'll call it, the Pilot E95S, which is one of the more faithful vintage remakes. And I'm excited to take a look at them both, given that I like them both, which is nice for a change. The Pilot Elite came out during a time where there was kind of a fountain pen arms race going on in Japan between three brands: Pilot, Sailor, and Platinum, the big three of Japanese pen manufacturing. And they remain the big three of Japanese pen manufacturing, though Pilot has kind of won because they're a much bigger brand in terms of like what they make. They make, they make the Pilot G2, the best pen of 2021. But during this time, there were so many of this style of pen made. The long short style, which was a really nice pocketable pen that can be posted to become a full-size one. More on that obviously in the close-ups. But Pilot, Sailor, and Platinum all made their own long shorts in a variety of different finishes, nib styles, nib carrots actually. Another interesting little tidbit about that era is the Japanese carrot wars, as they're called, in which Japanese manufacturers were all like fighting against each other to have the highest carat of gold in their nib. Sailor actually won that one with a 23 carat solid gold nib on some of their pocket pens, which are quite rare. And they don't offer anything particularly special. But what's interesting, of course, is that Sailor has kind of cornered the market in high gold content lately with their 21 karat gold standard Pro Gear nibs. Which are very nice, but the 21 karat golds really just kind of offers a unique feel. Anyway, that aside, these are 14 karat gold nibs, but I thought it was a cool little piece of history around the same time. Now, let's get right into it. Alrighty, let's take a look at these two lovely little long short pens. So when I say long short, it refers to the style of these two type of pens in that they gosh, now that I say it out loud, I'm not exactly sure why, but I guess it's because they go from short to long. Starting with the Vintage Elite, you've got a plastic body underneath a cross-hatched metal cap with silver trim. And then you've got the little Elite logo there. Pretty small pen. But, like 120 millimeters capped makes a perfect little pocket pen. But of course, when you slip the cap off, revealing a tiny little pen with a nice little inset nib there, you'll notice that the cap is very long. And this is what the long short is about. So you post it, and then you actually get a decently sized pen. This ends up being 146 millimeters posted, which is actually like on the longer side of things as far as I know. So that's kind of the whole deal with these. The whole, short in the pocket, long in the hand. This pen is a cartridge converter filler. So you unscrew this back part here. You can fit any Pilot converter besides the Con 70, of course. This is a Con 40, the world's favorite converter that we all love because it rattles. And
Yeah, these pens are pretty straightforward. The nib is, as I mentioned earlier, kind of an inset nib, but not inlaid. And you'll know why I'm making that distinction later. Another interesting about this era of pilot nibs, this is a 1974 Elite. These are not rhodium plated like you'd see on like modern silver tone gold nibs. This is white gold, which is pretty cool. It doesn't make a huge difference or really any discernible difference, but I just think it's cool. And yeah, it's 18 karat gold. This is an extra fine, which very fine because it's a Japanese pen. And it writes rather nicely, but of course we'll get to that in the writing sample. Oh, I like to mention too, the clip is nice because it is hinged, so it makes for a nice pocket pen, nice and durable. Snaps over there. You don't have to really worry about anything breaking on you, which is lovely. So, I'll also show you guys. I also have the matching pencil, which is pretty sweet. I think these make for a very handsome little set, and if you follow me over on Instagram, you'll know that I've been using these as my everyday carry for a little bit now. Next up, the E95S. So, like the Pilot Justice or the Pilot M90, this, again, is a modern revival of a classic 70s, 80s Japanese pen. And it bears many similarities to the original. I would almost call it a replica. Although I haven't seen any Elites in this exact colorway, which is the burgundy and kind of cream metal with gold trim. Same construction pretty much. Metal cap, plastic body. And you got the pull cap, revealing, in this case, a 14 karat gold nib that is inlaid rather than inset. And you'll see what that means. It's called a fingernail style nib just because it kind of resembles a fingernail. But it is more or less flush with the plastic of the body, and I think it's a really attractive look. The dimensions of this pen are almost exactly the same. 120 millimeters, while capped, and 147, so 1 millimeter of difference when open. However, this pen does feel larger in the hand just because it tapers less. It's got a lot squatter of a silhouette, whereas the Vintage Elite kind of tapers off a lot more and is a little bit shorter in the grip section. But really, it's not a hugely meaningful difference. You'll notice, of course, that the caps are not interchangeable. This one's slightly thicker. And then, yes, like the Vintage Elite, it takes the same converters, this one being a Con 20. So, let's get into the writing sample. So, I've got both of these filled with Pilot Blue, which I thought would be appropriate. This is a Pilot Elite 1974, and it is an extra fine. This is one of the nicest extra fines I've ever used. I've been disappointed before by Pilot extra fines. If you've seen my Pilot Vanishing Point video, it was nothing to write home about, unless you were complaining in your letters home. Whereas this one is, I would say, kind of the perfect nib to have on you at all times as a practical user. It is wet enough to enjoy using, but not too wet on, like cheaper paper. Not really, bouncy at all, but just smooth, consistent, gets the job done, and highly enjoyable while you're doing that job. Let's get a little... It's kind of tough to draw these ones, but I like the shape of the breather hole too. It's not like a circle. It's kind of like this oval situation. I'm down with it. A lot of vintage pilots have that. I've seen it on some customs, etc. I used to be really into this era of pilots. I owned a few Pilot Customs with the inlaid nib and the striped body, but it was just a phase. But I'm starting to get back into it. Lovely stuff. Now let's check out the E95S. Pilot E95S. This is modern. Fine. This is a fine nib, so it's going to be obviously, a little bit smoother than the extra fine, but really not that much. It's got a decent amount of feedback, but not in an unpleasant way. It's consistent. It's also very usable, if not a little bit less so, just because it's slightly wider. So maybe on copy paper you'd start to see a little bit of bleed. Again, no meaningful bounciness of any kind in the nib, but that's not really what you want for this kind of pen. I have seen like Falcon nibs on vintage examples of these, which have like the cutouts and everything, very cool, but not on the modern ones. So this might be a gold nib, but it's no flex nib. Not that should be surprising in today's pen market. But again, just a very comfortable user, very well balanced. And let's go like that, and like that. Kind of reminds me of the silhouette of a Schaefer inlaid nib. Just overall, good looking pen. Writes well. Really nothing to complain about. I do still prefer the nib on this one, and the cross-etched cap is a winner for me, but these are both good pens, man. Really nothing to complain about. Nice. All right. Let's sum all this up. I'll see you on the other side.
All right, folks. You've seen the writing performances. You've seen the body features. Now, my final thoughts on these two vintage and modern elites. I think that these are both really great pens. I love them both. I use them both, though I guess I sold my E95S a while back. This is one that's on loan to me. I think that these are both excellent pens in that the Vintage Elite is a beautiful pen, for sure, but some people don't want to deal with the risks of buying a used vintage pen. You could get a bad nib, it could have a crack in it that you didn't see on the eBay listing. They can be more expensive, especially like some of the rarer finishes of the Vintage Elites, like the sterling silver one or the all crosshatched or whatever. They can get kind of pricey. So getting the E95S is actually a great thing to do because you get a very, very similar writing experience and a pretty much exact in every way replica of a Vintage Elite, which is wild to me just because that happens so infrequently in modern remakes, that the remake is as good as the original. The only downside being, you can't really get the diversity of different finishes that you would be able to get on a vintage one. But then it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off. Either way, both of these pens are a great option if you're looking for an everyday carry pen, or just like, a pen to have clipped into your traveler's notebook, or you're just a pocket pen. They're, metal mostly with some plastic. Of course, the vintage ones, you can get them all metal bodies, which is kind of cool, but they're sturdy, they're reliable, they sit pretty deep in the pocket, which is nice. I don't have a pocket on this shirt, but, pretty unobtrusive, and it's a good looking pen. It's not super flashy, but I wouldn't mind carrying this to like a nice event, especially this little crosshatched one. So yeah, if you're in the market for a pen that you want to be taking places and writing things at those places, potentially drawing, especially with a nice finer nib, try an Elite. I would highly doubt that you would be disappointed, because there's really what's not to like. It's a small pen that becomes big for those of us who need to write with a bigger pen. It's pretty quick to deploy because it's a snap cap. You're not dealing with any screw caps or anything. I don't see really any downsides to these pens. So, yeah, it's a pleasant surprise. I've had my fair share of, disappointing remakes, but this one is genuinely very, very good. My only qualm, just make some more colors. I've seen a blue limited edition one of like blue body. I think that looks really cool. However, they don't make it as a regular run. I would love if they did some new cap colors. Like if they'd made E95S's like they made Vanishing Points like every year, I think it would sell really well because not a lot of people are into this kind of like vintage color aesthetic, if that makes any sense. If you made them in some cool, chased finishes or whatever, I think people would eat that right up. If you're listening, Pilot, hire me. Anyway, I hope you liked this look at these two lovely little Japanese pens. I had a lot of fun making this one, and yeah, follow me over at Olive Boy Pens on Instagram if you've got one. I've been posting some fun stuff over there. And drop a subscribe if you want to see more stuff. I've been having a lot of fun making these, as always. So I look forward to seeing you in the next one.